Hello, everybody. The purpose of this video is to give you a little bit of some guidance on the research proposal that you'll be performing and completing in this class. So we'll go over some of the guidelines, and then I'll show you a template, and then also an example. All three are posted up on Blackboard. So just a couple of highlights here. Again, you can pick a topic of your choice, anything that's of interest to you that you want to learn more about. Okay, so I would encourage you to do something that you want to know more about because it'll give you some kind of incentive to kind of keep things fresh and interesting for you. So some of the formatting, make sure it's Times New Roman 12-point font, double spaced. Page length will vary, but it's usually between 10 to 12 page in total, your final draft. The content include the following headings and subheadings, and in general cover the information described under each heading or subheading. Again, use the template I provided on Blackboard to help you write your rough draft and final draft of the proposal. So you can, we'll show you that to you in a minute. The abstract is, we'll go over a little bit of details, and then there's a little bit more about this in Unit 8, I believe, gives you a little bit more detail about also a little more detail about what each of these parts are about. But the abstract is similar to other abstracts you see in research articles that when you start to read them, they basically provide a brief summary of your proposed study. So think of it basically as a summary of what you're going to be doing. Your abstract will end with a very brief description of the statistical analysis you will use. Most abstracts also include results and discussion, but you will not have that since we're not going to actually be performing your research proposal, but rather just, like I said, just making a proposal. The introduction, again, should introduce the topic, and you can see there's a variety of questions that you want to make sure that you answer. You have it in a first paragraph and then some additional paragraphs. But the idea is these are some questions that you should be asking. Why do you want to do the study? Why is it worth studying? Does it contribute to a new understanding or phenomenon in the area? Does a research problem or objective needs to be stated within a context of the scholarship in the area? All right, so after the introduction paragraph, you need to discuss the research problem. The middle portion of the introduction includes the literature review, which presents a discussion of the most important research and theoretical working related to the research problem. So basically what you're doing, the research, is you're providing, a little bit about the background, significance, and then you're also showing with some review of literature what's been done, what has been done already and what has not already been done. And this might be a reason why it's important to learn more about your topic because it's never been done before. And you're going to learn more about that, about what's been done and not done as you start to do a review of literature. And we'll talk more about that in the units as we go along. But look through this. It gives you some examples of some questions to think about. And then finally, when you end with your introduction, your specific research purpose, hypothesis, or question should be stated clearly at the end of the review of literature, often in a separate paragraph. You'll probably find that you are continuing to craft your research questions. You may need to revise your lit review, cutting out vague or irrelevant research and adding other research that you have come across since you first started writing the proposal. In other words, as you start to write things, you're going to, what might sound good at first, you realize that it may not be needed anymore, but additional information that you might need to add that you didn't have before. But again, so it's kind of an ebb and flow as you start to develop your introduction and your review of literature. Now, some additional things once you're done with the introduction, you will move on to the methods, which essentially describes how you're going to conduct the study. Again, you will not be actually physically conducting the study, but if you were, how would you go about doing that? And there's really important parts about this is because as you write the methodology, you're going to learn about how other researchers do things in your field, which will be effective to identify good methodology versus ineffective methodology for you to identify good research versus not so good research. So even if you're not going to go into research, this section is going to be important for you to understand the difference between a quality way of measuring the outcomes versus not good outcomes. So when you read that, you then can decide this is a good research study that I can really read about, learn about, and pass that on to my clients. So you start out with subjects, participants, talk more about them, a little bit of overview of them. The measures, the section to identify describes every measure. If you're going to use questionnaires, what instrument equipment will you do to identify particular outcomes in the population of your choice. Then you're going to do procedures. Describe what you plan to actually do and the kind of research you will conduct. So, in other words, are you going to be doing particular? Would you be doing a certain, let's say, amount of resistance training over an 8-week period to identify the outcomes of larger muscle gain? Okay, so that's kind of the procedure. So, how and when will you actually collect the data for your study? What, when, and how often will your participants be asked to do something? So those are really what procedures mean. So what are you actually going to have the participants do? Think of it more as like the intervention. And then you have the data analysis. And then this section, you won't actually have to be doing your particular data analysis, but rather you'll be identifying how to go about what's the most effective. If you were to do data analysis, what's the best measures to go about in terms of your data analysis. What would you use? What's the most appropriate statistical analysis? And this is covered in the unit discussions. And finally, you have the references. There'll be an APA format, and one of the units will go over this in terms of how to properly cite this and how to do a reference page properly. So this is the kind of an overview of some of the guidelines. Review this. You can find this on Blackboard, but review this. This gives kind of will help jar with all the questions, will help jar some of the maybe some ideas as you go about. Some other things that you might have here, I've mentioned it here. I've included a template that you can use. I would highly recommend that you essentially use this as a way to, you download this and you just start using this to write directly onto. And this will help in terms of formatting. And you notice here you'll have certain things I have comments on here. Make sure you read those, but after you've read those, delete those comments by simply just doing a right click, and you can come down and you simply delete comment. But read those, and I've again provided space. Again, how long, what you should include in terms of the subheading, and then how long each should be. Again, some comments that you should read and then delete those comments. Here's a methodology section with the subheadings that you should use. Again, just keep those subheadings and write the information underneath it. And then references, some things to consider when writing the references. So again, after you've read these particular things, these are not really subheadings. You'd want to get rid of these particular parts of the reference and actually put the citation in that you use. And then you have the appendices. If you have any appendix, if you plan to use psychological scales or any behavioral questionnaires in your study, you may need to include a copy and appendix at the end of the proposal. Otherwise, you can omit this section. So you might have a particular questionnaire that you want to include or a data collection form. You would just include those in the appendices. All right, so that is the template. You should download and use that for writing your proposal. And finally, on Blackboard, I did include an example. Dr. Ben Webb has provided an example of how to go about performing this intervention here, your proposal. And this is just an example of what you should do. And again, I provided some examples or some comments that you can do, like not sure how to make your header look different on the first page. Here's an example of how to make that look different in terms of your heading versus your different heading here, okay? But anyway, so here's an abstract. Again, I provided some examples, some questions to think about, or comments to make you think about it, but here's an abstract. Here's some key words. Again, provide some more details, some things to think about as you're doing this. And then we have the introduction. Notice there's actually no title of introduction. You actually remove the introduction, actual title itself, but it's still there. And you then you start off with the introduction. That includes the review of literature. Notice how you can see citations are throughout when you're completing this. So include that as well. Again, some additional things that you should consider when you're writing this. For example, here, just before stating your purpose and hypothesis, remind the reader of the rationale for the study. So this hopefully will give you some guidance. And then here's a methodology section of how he designed this, some things to think about as you're writing this again. So use this example again as a guide to help you in terms of moving things along, and it should be helpful for you. If you have any questions, please let me know. But here's some measures, demographic, vocation related, self-reported, sedentary. Again, comments on the side for you to think about, accelerometer data that you would do. Procedures, again, is, what are they going to do? Actually have them do, whereas measures, you're measuring the kind of the outcome, the assessment, so to speak, to find out if there were changes that occurred. Whereas procedure is, what are you going to have? What is the intervention you're going to have that group do, your population? And then finally, you have some data analysis. Again, you're not going to actually be performing the data analysis, but you should be writing the data analysis as if you were to do these. Okay. So here's finally the references in terms of how to properly references. You do need a minimum of 12 references in your proposal. So make sure you aim for, it should be, don't just get 12 just to get 12, but they should be something that helps helps with your writing of your proposal. Okay. So anyway, this is the format of it. And then finally, if there's any appendices here, here's a scale, for example, that they used for this, intervention materials that they do, content of text messages that he may have used, for example, so forth and so on. Okay, so this hopefully is an example that you can use as a guide as well, along with the template that should be useful in your preparation of your research proposal. And again, if you don't understand all of these sections at this point, at the beginning when you're watching this, don't worry. Each of the units is going to help build upon and help you understand this so you can go off and be able to write each of these sections. All right, so if you have any questions, let me know. Hopefully you'll find this research proposal to be something of value to you and something that will help you learn more about something. If you have any questions, please let me know.